Tim Tollefson, rest day. Good to see you, buddy.
It has been far too long. It almost, I don't know, does it feel like it's every June we reconvene to get on the mic?
Yes, it does. And then we then go into the busiest part of the year for both of us. We saw each other in Chamonix. I didn't make it to Trail Fest this year, but though I want to hear about it, I heard it was amazing. But we have had no preamble banter here on the pod, so it's great to get you back on the horn. This is, of course, sort of a newsy show. I was thinking about some stuff that's happened in the sport. I actually took a little bit of a vacation, Tim. I took a week off because I'm getting a lot more mature in my old age. And as I plug back into the sport, assess what happened during my absence, I was like, you know what? There's some fun stuff happening here. And you know who would be fun to talk about it with? Mr. Tim Tollefson. Always good to chat with you, buddy.
Dude, I'm stoked you're implementing that stuff because Hoffman Clinic isn't cheap. You need to start getting those little wellness nuggets year round. You can't wait till something breaks.
Exactly. Again, slowly getting better at that here as we now become a little bit more mature of an operation. Anyway, I wanted to just launch into it here I want to hear about Trail Fest a little bit because I think, it will be tangential to some of the stuff that we talk about. The biggest or the first story I want to talk about that's happened in the sport is the fact that UTMB continues to expand. I think you and I both have a lot in common. Can tackle this topic from a couple of different directions as some slowly retiring pro athletes who also happen to be independent race directors, now fans of the sport, sort of quasi media members in your case. I mean, you're certainly somebody whose opinion people trust. So maybe let's talk about Trail Fest as it relates to all this stuff, but just to make it clear and set it up for the audience. So UTMB bought a race called Zugspitz Ultra Trail in Bavaria in northern Germany. And it's an incredible race. I did it in 2019. And as is the case, whenever these announcements are made, people have various opinions about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing for the sport. And I thought this would provide a good microcosm to talk as, two independent race directors who have also had great opportunities to race at a lot of UTMB events as to what this means. So maybe just teeing that up. I don't know if you had any initial thoughts or comments about UTMB's acquisition, especially of Zugspitz. They're also bringing back that Oman by UTMB race, which was part of that Ultra Trail World Tour. I know that Ultra Trail World Tour was something that, we both found a lot of success and had a lot of fun competing on that tour as it existed. Maybe just starting there, any top line comments or observations from this new acquisition?
I honestly, the first thing that pops in my head is, well, that makes sense. Another acquisition, it almost didn't register to me, but then I thought about it. It's like, wait, this is the largest German ultra event or trail event out there. It's a very popular, it has history, it has all these things that, to be acquired by the behemoth is very significant, because it isn't just another acquisition. It's a significant acquiring. And so the more I thought about it, it just kind of highlighted how I almost feel like it's a strong analog of what we've seen over the last, maybe it's been a decade now, of just media landscapes of the bundling, unbundling, paradigm of, we continue to find ourselves in trail in the great bundling era where things are being consolidated. There are, things being bought out or purchased or acquired. And so, it's not surprising to hear this. I think that for those that are, Zugspitz fans, I think it probably hits home and it hits deep. The one thing that stood out to me was that's historically been a Solomon race, and UTMB World Series are almost all Hoka events. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but it seems, so I'm curious what's going to happen from a brand partnership side, bringing that in. And I think it's very topical, especially as we kind of see in the US, we continue to, have these conversations, maybe more privately than publicly recently, but of what all of this means, and where are we going to support? And, it's easy for us to maybe have opinions and kind of get riled up, but ultimately, because we all want to go to Western States, we all want to go to UTMB, we're going to play in the circuits that allow us to get into there. And I think this will lead into some maybe kind of fun pontificating that we'll have eventually. But yeah, my initial takeaway is takeaway. Yeah, that makes sense. It's maybe it kind of highlights where I'm at, and as I'm starting to feel more confident in just like the people I'm building things with, that it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't register too high on my like meter, honestly. So
really, okay, well that's good to know. So a couple of things that I think are relevant here for the audience. From the press release, it said that the event will continue to be operated by the same experienced team whose deep local knowledge and commitment to excellence have shaped Zugspitz Ultra Trail by UTMB into one of the most loved trail events. That was a quote from the press release. So, even, of course, even with the team staying on, the team that built Zugspitz into this important race in this region of Europe, even with the team, maintaining leadership, at least for probably at least the next couple of years, I would guess, there was still some consternation, especially from the local German trail running community. I don't know if you follow Salty Magazine. It's a cool upstart physical print magazine based out of Germany. I actually talked to those guys in Chamonix a couple of years ago and admire what they're doing, but they posted something on their Instagram that, was vocally skeptical about this partnership, about what it means for German trail running. I'll read a little.
See that, yeah.
I'll read a little snippet here and get your reaction here. What they say is, let's be clear, it isn't about throwing shade at Plan B, which is the former owner of Zugspitz. They've built great races and got many of us into the sport. Respect for that. But if you love something and you don't like where it's headed, you should speak up. This isn't about one organizer. It's about what kind of future we all want for trail running. Ironman is building a monopoly. That's not a hot take. It's a business strategy, and they're good at it. Deep pockets, sharp lawyers, polished logos, but their track record, ? Profit first. Polish the brand, standardize the product. The biggest money ends up furthest from the dirt. This is the opinion of one media outlet in Germany. The comment section was actually really interesting, of people offering differing perspectives. So I think, from my perspective, and the reason I wanted to talk about it with you is the fact that you and I both own races, right? Like, we are both independent race directors that exist outside of the racing series.
I know
that has gone a long way into bundling the sport. And so what I want to talk about, what I think about all the time, what I struggle with is like, well, how do we exist in this environment where a lot of the pro athletes are now forced to come into these funnels in order to have their opportunities to race at things like Western States, to have their opportunity to race at things like the UTMB World Final. And we talked about this on a podcast a couple of weeks ago with Corinne, and I wanted to build off it with you here. And I have actually a quote from a DM that I got from Rachel Entrikin, the most recent and inaugural champion of the Mammoth 200, who sent me this note after we published that episode, which I'll get to in a second. But I don't know if you have anything you want to touch on as it relates to Salty's criticism here, or just about, the idea of building a monopoly, because in the comments section, there was a lot of people who poked holes in that specific criticism. And I think it's worth talking about.
I love what Salty said there. And I think a lot of us could resonate with it. And it really makes me think about, the whole concept of, as a community, we have a lot of collective power and we can vote with our choices. And so if we don't like the way part of the community or the culture is going, like, we do have power to help shape that. It can feel as though we don't, because if something is consolidating and holding the thing that we want access to as kind of like they feel like they're the gatekeeper, then you have to just be selective. But I think that, I don't know, like, there's so many ways to go on this. In short, I do have a lot of empathy, and what Salty wrote, I resonate deeply with. And I think it's something that, as an independent operator, as you mentioned, I think about often, because I don't know, like Trailfest, my main event, was built with a very particular intention. And so the way I always come back to things is, while I'm a fan of the elite side of the sport, and I am, you said, very caringly and gracefully that like we're holding on. Maybe we're past holding on. We've been buried for a while as elites, but I'd like to think I have another match or two to burn, and I want elites to come to TrailFest. However, I really come to the kind of conclusion that elites are a nice to have. They're not a need to have. And I think you can pick out any number of examples in our sport where if an event exists on people's radar because it was part of a circuit or a series, or it had a golden ticket or an entry into something else, I think inherently those events are built on a chalky ridgeline, a shaky foundation, because they're on rented land. And the moment the winds change and the sport or the series or the circuit or the brand or fill in the blank shifts, the reason you were on people's radar is going to diminish. And I think it's just an important lesson that as event organizers, you really need a strong why, and you need to resonate and connect with the community and build something that can stand on its own. Because if you are only, trading off social cachet, you are ripe for disruption and extinction should something out of your control shift. It's kind of like this, for the young influencers out there that are building their brands off of brand dollars and algorithms, like the moment it shifts, like you're going to be in trouble. And so that's something we think about a lot at TrailFest, where it's like, hey, what's the reason we exist is to serve our community. And we define that as the local Mammoth Eastern Sierra community. We define that as the greater running community. And I do want the elites. I want all of those, the top names back. But if they don't return, we know that we can still operate effectively. And so, I don't know, that's kind of one thing. And it does as a fan, where if you see your local, let's say, it's not fair for us to claim this, but let's say, TrailFest was the Zugspitz and I sold to UTMB, like there'd be a lot of people that feel similar of like, wait, what the heck? Like this wasn't what we thought was our event. And I think that's one thing that is interesting in our current sport, where it's like culture versus, expansion, and they're sometimes at odds with one another.
Yeah. So well said, and so much good stuff in there. I want to bring back this concept of monopoly because I think it's important. And what you just said is I think the perfect example of like, all right, so if we think of the various like racing circuits that are very attractive to the pros, of course, the UTMB World Series is top of the list. Below that, Golden Trail World Series, obviously like the golden ticket events leading into the Western States 100, hugely significant in the sport. The World Trail Majors is sort of new and hoping to bring together independent races in a way that allows them to exist and continue to have a high profile in the sport without having to sell to a larger race organization. But then there's races like ours, like TrailFest, like Gorge Waterfalls, like the Big Alta, and we can still continue to exist and be successful in the sport. So therefore it's not a monopoly, right? Like UTMB does not own the sport. And especially the event side of the sport continues to be a very robust market where a bunch of independent entrepreneurs, mom and pop shops can set up amazing experiences for people and earn a living off of that hard work. That's really, really important. So, and especially if we compare it to triathlon, where Ironman, of course, comes from, they have much more of a quote unquote monopoly in triathlon, though they still don't have a monopoly there. Acknowledging the criticism from Salty here, I think it is fair for them to be skeptical about this. This is a race that feels important to that region of Bavaria in the same way that TrailFest feels really important to people in the Eastern Sierra, in that whole corridor. And having a change in ownership can feel like you might be losing the special sauce of what made this an important event. Though we should also acknowledge what is positive, what could be positive with this. Number one, I think it's the only by UTMB race in Germany. So it gives German athletes an easier way to get their stones and qualifications to get into the world final events, which a lot of trail runners are very interested in doing. That's a good thing for the German trail running community. That's a check in the pro column if we're making pros and cons, right? So as I think about it, like it's clearly not a monopoly. They do not have a monopoly on trail running events, and we are in no danger of them getting a monopoly, though it does feel like more and more there is it's not even a monopoly or a duopoly, but there's sort of like a multiopoly about all those circuits that we just mentioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
The UTMB World Series, the Golden Ticket Series, the Golden Trail World Series, even now the World Trail Majors, a multiopoly on professional racing. So this is where I want to bring in Rachel Entrekin's quote, because I think it's really, really interesting here. Okay. Rachel Entrekin, of course, one of the hottest athletes in the sport right now, having won both Cocodona and the Mammoth plus High Lonesome this year. Somebody who I think is at the advent of an explosion in terms of her personal profile, but who I think admirably marches to her own drum and does the races that she's inspired to do. And, you know, I think resists falling into any boxes. So I'm just going to read this here, and it's kind of long, so bear with me. And so she's referencing the last podcast that we did with Corinne. And she said, LOL, I just listened to Rest Day Pod, and the first 30 minutes gave me whiplash. I listened to the entire thing and deeply resonated, particularly about elites not being able to attend and race local events. For what it's worth, I would tremendously prefer running the Big Alta 100K, but the system that has been created has forced me to pursue UTMB and states pipeline races in order to appear relevant. Of course, I'm obviously not dumb enough to complain about getting an opportunity to race internationally, but I'd much prefer doing smaller local races that have meaning for me than forcing myself into the monoculture of today's trail running. We, in parentheses, the media participants and elites particularly, have decided to let brands and organizations tell us what events are supposed to be important and talked about. I think that's a fixable problem, but everyone has to be on the same page. She goes on to say, I'm almost done here. We've already shown that if participants decide a race is important culturally, it becomes important to brands despite a lack of field depth. And that race is hard rock. It's important to participants for decades, and we aren't letting it go, even though there's, you know, at best a handful of athletes in either gender who could be considered quote unquote elite. So it has stayed an A-tier race. Diagonal Des Fous is similar. They aren't bending or changing or becoming by UTMB or a golden ticket race, but they're just as important. We can decide what matters. We just are currently fine being told what we should be focusing on instead, unquote. That's Rachel Entrekin in my DMs on Instagram. She gave me permission to quote her here. Your reactions, Tim?
Preach. And so that dovetails exactly what I was saying earlier. It's collectively as a community, we have the power to shine the spotlight on what we care about. Now, sure, the industry can tell us what to care about, but ultimately, as the people that spend money, define culture, we have the power. But it is difficult when you are working up. It can feel like you're swimming against the current. And I empathize with Rachel deeply, because I think you and I come from a slightly different era than the current landscape of the Ultra Trail World Tour, which was the most popular global circuit when we were really in the peak of our career, was a collection of 8 to 12, then it ballooned into 28 independent races throughout the globe, owned and operated by independent agencies and organizations and individuals. And I think, you know, the introduction of the by UTMB was in 2019. And that, you know, it's fascinating when you really dive back and look at the history of all of these things. And Ironman was at play in 2015, and all these things like planting seeds of how we are now where we are. But I think it was neat back then because you were able to select a little more on defining your own calendar as a pro, where this, like as Rachel just highlighted, it doesn't feel like that's the case anymore, because if you want to run UTMB Chamonix, which is arguably an amazing event that and you have a privilege to sit here and say, oh, well, we can have opinions because we've done it, right? So like we can like sound off or talk highly or negatively about it because we've done it. But I think that it is the reality that if someone wants to run that, they have to run other by UTMB races. As you start backtracking, athletes only have so many opportunities in a year to really compete. And so if your A race is UTMB Chamonix, you already know what your calendar is going to look like. So it doesn't leave room for the mom and pop local events, you know, the way that it may have even 3 or 4 years ago before the UTMB World Series rolled out in 2022. And so I definitely think it, from that standpoint, it's unfortunate, and it kind of highlights the current landscape. And it makes me think about even how our sport has always not necessarily like acknowledge, but we have this like almost two parallel realities of the professional side and the participatory side. And it's very similar to the marathon, where the sport is propped up on mass participation, which inherently is not a spectator-friendly sport, but we are trying to promote the pro end and the professionalized side of it. And it's kind of like, you know, you'll hear people say, should they just branch out? Should they break away from one another? You know, it's, but I think it's the, I don't know if you say unfortunate or fortunate, but is the reality of what she just described, that it is a feeder system. You have to play inside those lines if you want to run that race. But I would agree with her. Collectively, we could say, hey, the Wasatch 100 is our new American race. Let's point the spotlight there. You don't need stones or all these other things to get into there. So I think it's a fascinating kind of, thing to throw out and kind of start to chat about. But I, as a runner and a fan, I don't want to be told what to do. I want to choose what I want to do. And so I empathize with the up and coming pros, or not even just pros, general runners, that if they want to run a certain race, you know, if you have to play by those rules, it's kind of like, well, I guess that's the cover charge maybe. But from the pro end of the sport, I don't think it's necessarily healthy to only have that be the fixation.
Yeah. So again, sort of a parallel world, as you, I think, described it, you know, us talking about what the elites have to do versus what the general trail participant and the quote unquote age groupers are doing here. The fact remains that the event side of the sport is robust and healthy. And actually, I got a message from Jeremy Long, our partner on Gorge and the Big Alta from Daybreak Racing, who listened to that last podcast too. And he sent me a note just about how their stats are, you know, like the participation stats over time for Daybreak Racing. And I actually pulled a little quote from that message too, because I was asking him to sort of interpolate what the point was that he was making with some of the numbers. And he said, it just reiterates that peeps are running a lot of different races despite significant disproportionate attention being given to UTMB races. It is what it is. I'm happy as long as people keep signing up for our races and corporate interests don't poach our events. We're playing the long game, accumulating respect and admiration, which goes a super long way in trail. But, you know, the thing that I wanted to just kind of workshop is, yeah, it is nice to have pros come to your events, right?
Absolutely.
And so, like, how can you make your event attractive to a professional athlete who's up and coming in the sport, who has a profile, who, you know, you can get to come experience your home trails? The Big Alta, in my case, is right outside my front door. Of course, Trail Fest is, you know, your local training ground too. It's special and you want to share it with people. And it's amazing when some of the best in the sport come to experience it. But of course, you and I have also been on the other side where, you know, we do have to do the things that are in the best interest of our sponsors and things like that. Do you think about that as it relates to Trail Fest, like how you can make it maximum appealing to the pros? I know you put a lot of emphasis on the community and the general participants in the race, but what do you think about in terms of keeping it compelling to the pros?
It's something that keeps me up at night because, yeah, there's major FOMO where, and, you know, I've had opportunity to cement our spot on these circuits or global series, and we've chosen not to because we feel that it's not in the best interest of our community. But it's something I talk to race directors all around the country actually about. It's very topical. In the last 6 weeks, I think I've had probably 3 or 4 dozen calls with either current race directors or aspiring race directors. And this is a topic that comes up every single time. And the short answer is there's no great solution. And I can say that based on my own experience as a pro, where as a pro, we will race where we can get the most respect and media attention, and we'll do that over prize purses. And so because as an elite or as a pro, you can then leverage your standing against your peers in your cohort to leverage contracts and future opportunities. And so as much as a prize purse would be awesome, and we've experimented, we've had $20,000 to $40,000 in prize money that we throw out, it doesn't attract more elites. I think that's where someone like Rachel is a great example. She's in the interim right now. She's in purgatory where she's trying to land a big contract because she's deserving of it, but she hasn't. So giving her $5,000, not giving, but her earning $5,000 at the Mammoth for her win is an impact for her. And so it's something that we feel that it's very valuable to do, but it's never going to attract more and more elites because of a prize purse. Elites want rankings, they want standings, and that needs a circuit or a series to build off of. So I don't know, but yeah, think about it a lot. I think that I think it's a great challenge in, maybe this isn't where you're going initially, but like that's where I think about also, what is one of America's greatest resources in the sport? I would argue, other than the actual resource of the lands that we run on, it is culture and it is community. And we continue to outsource and export that to these global circuits and series, which they are really leveraging, profiting off of the things that we have. And we probably also have probably the strongest media arm in the world for trail. And so I'm always thinking, like, why do we continue to export that to other people? Why don't we collectively build something that benefits everyone at the table? And as it grows, there's a profit share model that elevates every independent event, and hopefully all these other tributaries that we feel are like being held up through the sport, whether those nonprofits or local, like, I don't know. That's the future I would love to see happen in the sport of trail, where right now the current models are top heavy. They've created something, they're coming into and building events on top of communities, not inside of communities. And that's where the Ultra Trail World Tour had issues, I'm sure. But one thing I did appreciate about it was independently owned by the stakeholders. And the current models are not. They are independently owned by one organization or partner organizations that are then, working backwards. Exactly. And so I would love to see like more that like Indy Cup and this is where actually I think the strong analog is.
Define the Indy Cup, because this was inside baseball.
The Indy Cup. Well, my dream is to create the Indy Cup, which is a group of independent organizers and race directors that collectively are offering a circuit that is fulfilling on the mission of what Rachel said, but also it can be a stepping stone, or it could be a stepping stone towards maybe some of these other global events that we like, or it is the destination. Something what we've learned with TrailFest is this year we became the largest 50K in America, which is really cool in our fourth year. And of the 2,000 plus runners that we had, I got one email asking if I could apply for stones. That means that of all of our runners, whether they cared or not, they were not using TrailFest as a stepping stone into something else. It was enough of a destination for them. Wow. And that was a signal that, hey, there's an appetite in this growing demographic of ultra runners and trail runners that not everybody wants to go to these global circuits and series. And as Jeremy pointed out, and I think if you pull up the data of North American ultra runners that Ultra Running Magazine puts out, we're on pace to have the largest number of participants ever in North America, probably the largest number of events in North America. And that can happen in coexistence with UTMB World Series probably being the most successful they ever have. I think there's enough to kind of go around. And so the Indy Cup would be something but it's hard to create things. And I think that
it's basically like returning back to the Ultra Trail World Tour model. If we were to, create Trail Fest plus the Big Alta plus Gorge plus the Rut plus Broken Arrow, and somehow take a bunch of these independent races and create a series out of it. Maybe that makes it more attractive to the pros. But
that's actually what World Trail Majors rose out of, basically kind of like in opposition of the UTMB World Series model. And if you look at it, any historians out there will see the original people at World Trail Majors are the same events that would not sell to UTMB World Series, and they were part of the original Ultra Trail World Tour. And on their website, it says on their website, World Trail Majors, each with their own identity, diversity, respect, and personality. each time a unique experience. So World Trail Majors is leaning into, hey, Ultra Trail World Tour had a good thing going. We want to keep independently operating, but collectively in an open source community type way, build with our, cohort, which is something I'm a big fan of. And so, whether it's, and okay, so since we're here, can I just go down my idea? I make a case that Western States breaks away from UTMB World Series and joins the World Trail Majors because it is a standalone event on its own. They have so much weight that if they aligned with the World Trail Majors, you suddenly would then give people an opportunity to get into Western States through non-UTMB events, and it would kind of fragment the circuit into two really great circuits, where at the moment, I love what World Trail Majors is doing, but they lack a season finale, if you will, where sure, you don't need to have that. But I think if Western States were to align with World Trail Majors, I think we would have a really compelling two circuit system in the world of ultra running, where as a pro, someone could say, hey, I really want to run this, but I am tired of running only one events, however you label. Like, I don't want to be only in the feeder system to this one circuit. So I think it could fragment it in hopefully a positive way.
I hadn't thought about that. What an interesting thought experiment of how that would shift the balance of power in the global event landscape.
Because if you think about the reason Western States joined Ultra Trail World Tour back in 2014 was because they wanted to attract global talent to Western States. It was a very, we know the history of states, but it was lacking the international competition. And so I would say over the last 11 years of Ultra Trail World Tour, then the UTMB World Series, it's been successful. But I think, I know Western States is standalone by itself, that if they were to align with another circuit, whoever wants in states is going to go race those other races to earn their ticket. They're not racing just because it's a by UTMB race.
Yeah. So this is really interesting. And if you look at the World Trail Majors schedule, it's such an impressive collection of events, right? Transgran Canaria, Madeira, UTMF, Black Canyon, Ultra Trail Cape Town. Like, these are legit races that have been around for a long time that definitely do have their own local and independent flavor. It doesn't feel like a uniform event that you could experience. Like, you travel to any corner of the globe and the race feels the same. And it reminds me too that the GPT 100 just happened as we're recording recently, where Caleb Olson won the 100-miler there, adding a nice exclamation point at the end of a huge season. He won 12,000 euros plus, maybe a bonus. So it's a decent payday. He likely will probably win the series now with those two victories. Of course, he won Transgran Canaria earlier in the season. You just made the comment that cash usually isn't a major motivator for a lot of the pros right now. But I don't know, like, to me, he won by 2 hours. It wasn't super competitive. And, to what degree does that actually benefit Caleb Olson's profile in the sport? Probably not to the same degree than if he had gone and done some random by UTMB event in China at the end of the year or something like that. So anyway, just bringing that up because I think it's a practical example of kind of what we're talking about here, but it is also an example of, somebody who is inarguably one of the best in the sport right now, opting out of, the straight cookie cutter by UTMB pathway and throwing his credentials, his credibility behind, sort of this B-tier series with the World Trail Majors. And hopefully that will be something that helps them, continue to increase that participation. Did you have something you want to say? I wanted to.
Yeah. I think it's a great example. And I'll preface this with saying, I'm an unapologetic fan of UTMB Mont Blanc, of the original UTMB. We've been going there for 10 straight years. We built our careers from that. Also, you could argue the strength of that event really came off the backs of a lot of the media that rose out of our 2014, 15, 16, 17 exploits over there. And so collectively, I think all parties really benefited from that. And so I'm not anti UTMB at all, but I would
Neither
love
am
to
I.
see.
I want to say that. I want to say that too.
Like, I think it's really important though. I love choice, and I want runners to be able to choose for themselves what they value. And so what I don't like is when it does feel as though if someone in our sport is begrudgingly signing up for an event to then just do another event. I don't think that's fair to the runner. I don't think it's fair to the volunteers, the race organizers, if you have people going through the motions. And I think that's not an indication of a healthy sport. And so those are the things that I think like these are really great, thought experiments to talk out and like start having the conversation of collectively as a sport, what do we want to see? As a community, what do we want to see? And to Rachel's point earlier, brands have a lot of power here. The other thing that isn't really spoken about is like, as a pro, you're going to go where your bonus structure aligns. And so if a brand wants to prioritize something, they can just add it. Like I've talked to a lot of pros where they said, even recently, someone wanted to go to Madeira, but it wasn't part of the UTMB World Series. They had to ask their brand to add it to the bonus structure. They did. Now that athlete's going to go to Madeira. And so like, there's a lot of power there also that the brands and the athletes themselves, they can start helping to change the landscape.
Yeah.
But yeah, Caleb going over there, it is unfortunate because as a fan, I don't really know what that race was. I don't know the meaning of it. I know he ran well. He won by 2 hours. That's really cool. But I think that's where I'm a huge fan of World Trail Majors. I think that it probably needs a little massaging to really kind of like level up and be a true competition with the other global circuits. Because I think if you are attracting someone like Caleb, there should be like an amazing storytelling opportunity to like showcase this.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting. And
just to bring things full circle here, thank you for all that. I mean, it's so much good stuff.
I know.
You said people do have a choice, and people are voting with their dollars and with their time, deciding what they want to do. Increasingly, though, the pros have less of a choice than ever. So I wanted to use this platform as a call to action here, Tim. Maybe on behalf of both of us, you can decide. But to any up and coming pros, come to our races and we will do everything we can. I will make it my mission in life through Freetrail to gas you up, to blow you up, to be a supporter in the short and long term in your career. And, we will also have prize purses and be excited to welcome everybody. And we do have strong elite participants who are signed up for our events. And we just we care about everybody who lines up and who makes their way to the finish line. But it is also, as fans of the sport, really great to be able to see those world-class athletes come and experience our events. And so
absolutely
come to our races and we'll do everything
I just would love to hear what people also think about. Like, I don't know, we want so badly to build a really healthy pro circuit. I don't know. And it's the same thing marathoning has struggled with for decades. Like, I don't know. How do we build fans in trail?
Yeah.
Can you build fans in trail? Or is it inherently baked into our sport that we are a participatory sport? We're not a spectator sport. That's a question I want people to tell us. Like, is there a path where we actually have true fandom in trail? Or is it always going to be intricately tied of mass participation with the elite side, which I think is beautiful in its own right? But is this dream of truly having like a professional league just that? Is it just a dream? I don't know.
Right. Well, let's move on. I just wanted to add one final thing here at the end, and it came from Jeremy Long, also from Daybreak Racing. He made the point that the innovation comes from the small independent players, which I thought was actually a really important observation. Like the 10K at Trail Fest, like Jamil, Aravaipa is an independent organization. He really innovated with coverage, live streaming. Cocodona, like the Rut was one of the early sort of true mountain races in the United States, very innovative. And so, that's where I think a lot of the, where a lot of the texture is in the sport, where the feeling is and the emotion is in the sport, and where the innovation comes from is from the small independent races. And the other thing he brought up too was stewardship. and how much independent race directors, how much work and how much effort, how much cash they put into maintaining their own courses. He said that Daybreak has spent over $30,000 this year just on stewardship efforts. So I just want to give a pat on the back and round of applause to all.
And then I think it's important to say that that stewardship that they put in is for all recreators to enjoy. It's not just for trail runners, it's for hikers, for anglers, it's for anyone that uses those public lands, and spot on. And that's something that I don't know. My hope would be that as things maybe get higher and higher up into the ivory towers, that isn't lost or just turned into like, hey, we can now, since we have deep pockets, we're just going to toss some money this way. Like there's a difference between boots on the ground, saws in hands, out doing things, and just like cutting a check, to kind of make you feel better.
All right. The Indy Cup.
I know.
Send us an email. Let us know what you think. All right. The next topic I wanted to get your 2 cents on here, Tim. The other reason why I thought you would be the perfect co-host of today's episode is that there's a lot of road to trail news happening right now. I came out of my vacation and all of a sudden I see, oh my God, Molly Seidel signed up for Black Canyon. Oh my God, Des Linden's putting out a YouTube video that's heavily suggesting that she wants to run Western States. Oh my God, Kipchoge's wearing the Radical Airflow shirt at the New York City Marathon. Clearly, Nike wanting to put that piece of innovation on their biggest superstar. Maybe we spend a minute or two on each of those examples. I don't know where you want to start.
And there's no shortage of trail curious runners out there, and I can't blame them, right? Like, it's the best sport. And I say that coming from the ranks that they are, well, not at the level they were, but, from the marathon and from cross country and track and field. It's not surprising. But what I do think is interesting is you're seeing someone like Molly, arguably still prime of her career. So if she were to choose to refocus and spend another 5 to 10 years on the roads, she could.
She's only 31. I looked it up today.
Yeah. So she's actively choosing something that fulfills her for a reason, which I think is really neat. And she also, I believe, she forewent like her contract with Puma or something happened, but she's unsponsored. But she's the Olympic bronze medalist, like from Tokyo in the marathon. Like appearance fees alone with that, she can be pulling in 6 figs the rest of her career at any marathon she wants. So if she's going to choose to spend her time on the trail with us, dude, welcome her with open arms. I know everyone already would, but dude, Molly, come on out. Let's go. Come hit Big Alta like right after you hit up Black Canyon.
That's an interesting point though, too, isn't it? Because like if she does Black Canyon as she is signed up for, and we should say she was signed up for the Canyons 50K, didn't end up starting last spring, but that would prevent her from being at peak fitness for a spring marathon, which would be a huge earning opportunity, as you mentioned.
For sure. And so this is something that, she's marketable without a doubt. So like if she were to choose, she could have a sponsorship right now. I would assume that she has chosen not to because for mental health reasons, she wants autonomy and control over what she's doing, which I really respect. Like, big kudos to Molly for prioritizing what's important to her, because the moment you sign that contract, things change. You have expectations and deliverables, and it's a privilege, but it's also something if you're not ready or if you don't want to, go at it on your own. But yeah, I could imagine that, the big events are going to, be, kind of in her crosshairs. And that's where it ties into everything we said earlier. Like we get crossover athletes from the trail or the track. Of course, they're going to immediately target UTMB and Western States because that's where the spotlight has been on. And so like collectively as a community and media arms, we are the ones dictating that, because if they're trail curious, they're going to come in and that's all they know. So they're going to set that, then they're going to start working backwards. They're going to start going through the feeder system. So it could be an opportunity to meet them where they're at. It's like, hey, here's some alternatives. These are some things that are important to our community. But I love to see it. I think it's also fascinating because I would argue I'm one of those. A lot of people enter trail on the tail end of their career, which is what Des is doing. She still arguably is running well. She ran a 2:26 at Boston, which is fantastic, but she admitted, I'm no longer competitive. So 2:26 is not elite at the world ranking anymore. So she's choosing to move on, where Molly could still be very competitive, but she's actively choosing to experiment. So I think that's an interesting thing from those two. It makes sense that Des would move over. And I know that Marathon des Sables is in her future. And she, I believe in 2026 is going out there with Magda, which will be pretty exciting. I don't know. So breaking news on the Freetrail podcast.
I was just texting with Ryan Sands about Marathon des Sables. Apparently it's the 40th anniversary next year.
Yep. And so I think that's a really cool thing. But knowing Des a bit, Western States is definitely, on her radar. She paced Joe at Western States and was at training camp. And so I think it's neat to see that. The Kipchoge thing, I think, is interesting in that I think this highlights that ACG is really here to play, because Kipchoge has no interest in running trail events. He's not going to be running.
Well, before you go any further, I don't know if you saw this, but before the New York Marathon, he said, I'm going to be making a big announcement after the race. And of course, I'm like, oh my goodness.
He's going to go, he's going to, I mean, I thought it was, he signed an exclusive deal with Trailfest. He was only going to be running with us. But I mean, so what's fascinating about Kipchoge, arguably the most marketable marathoner in the history of the marathon. And so Nike is doubling down on activating their golden child, which I think is really cool. But the fact that they pulled ACG into it means that they are also going to be doubling down, or not doubling down, but they're going to stay focused on ACG's rebrand and relaunch. And I think they're going to make a bigger splash in trail moving forward. We've always said this, the moment Nike decides to play in trail seriously, they're going to be a player. And I think this is highlighting it. They want to cross-pollinate from their largest marketing arm of their most marketable athlete currently, Kipchoge, throw on the ACG, fishnet stocking, and then they can use that to kind of elevate these things that they're doing with ACG. So as a fan of the sport, I think it's great. I think it's elevating everything. It's showing that we have a community and a culture, again, that people want a piece of. I'm always going to harp on, I hope that these brands, these circuits, these players, they truly are willing to build with communities and not on top of our community. I don't know.
Very, very well said. Not much to add. I think the Kipchoge radical airflow example is just another one of these surreal, wow, trail running is culturally relevant, or at least outside of our tiny little community. The other news that came out while I was away was that apparently somebody's making a real Hollywood film about the Badwater or something like that. I haven't done enough research to know exactly what that is. But I mean, for Nike to follow up Caleb Olson's win at Western States and the huge impact that shirt had in generating interest and curiosity in what they were doing, and taking that innovation and putting it on the most recognizable marathoner in the world at his, what seemed to be his last professional race also. It's a clear strategic move of
absolutely.
Okay, this is a very important product from us. It comes from the, quote unquote, outdoor vertical at ACG versus just straight Nike running. Proof that trail running is at the, like indie race directors are on the bleeding edge of innovation for the event side of the sport. The trail and outdoor product is at the bleeding edge of innovation, now bleeding into.
Which would be cool to see more of that. And that's where I hope brands push further, because when was the last time we truly had something innovative in our sport? It was the advent of the super shoe, so this is
the super shirt.
The super shirt. It's, but we really haven't had innovation in running for a while. So let's push those boundaries. It also kind of highlight, you saw Des, the moment you see an athlete at the top of their game in the roads not wearing a singlet, they're transitioning. If they're wearing a t-shirt or if they're wearing Airflow, it means that they are on their way into something else. They are no longer taking themselves as, it's almost like that social signal of don't worry guys, I'm not podiuming today.
Okay, noted on that. Well, really exciting. Molly, as you said, she is on the start list of Black Canyon. I looked at Ultra Sign Up before we got started. Super exciting to see her make that sort of big golden ticket debut there. And it would be amazing to see if she could get into Western States. And yeah, Des, she's got nothing else to prove. So the fact that she's interested in just experiencing our sport, whether it's at a super high level, trying to be a pro and rack up wins like her friend Magda Boulet did after her road career when Magda came over, of course, had a spectacular career in trails, including winning Western States. I don't know what Des's inspiration or motivation is, whether it is mostly just exploratory or whether it is competitive. Of course, she did get the world record at 50K a few years ago too. So just some fun things for the audience to monitor. And like this triathlon to trail phenomenon with, Eli Hemming and Heather Jackson, now Eric Lagerstrom. Now we've got Molly Seidel, Des Linden. Unfortunately, no Kipchoge yet, but we'll see what we can do here. Okay, I know we're sort of like coming up on an hour here, but a couple more things I would love to just chat with you about. Number one, Kilian Jornet back on the start list at Western States. I remember our post-race show that we recorded at your house. I think it was Sunday or Monday after Western States this year.
I know.
We had the thought experiment of, because Kilian was, I think, 9 minutes behind or 8 minutes behind Caleb Olson, the winner. And I made the sort of provocative question of, does the lack of super shoes caught, W this year? Kilian's back. I don't know. My brain immediately went to, okay, Normal's launching a plated super shoe at Western States next year. So anyway, throwing it to you. Western States, of course, is always part of the, annual conversation. We're talking about it here in November, but of course, special circumstances with Kilian registering and committing to come back in 2026.
First, I just want to say thank you, Kilian, for coming back. It's going to be an honor to have you back for your 4th Western States, which is really cool. It's my takes on this are threefold. One, he's competitive till the day he dies. He wants to win. He hates to lose. And on that front, we need Jim back in. We need Caleb back in. We need all of the players back in because, as we said, it might be the last time, it's the original course, quote unquote original course. And while I'm a big proponent of like, hey, let's just race the fields, it would be cool to see all these guys duke it out before we have the Granite Chief Wilderness reroute. Second, I think it is a somewhat play of Normal, and every other brand knows that North America is an important market. They want to make a stamp. And so, maybe they're rolling out a super, trail shoe, carbon plated, super critical foam, yada, yada, maybe some innovation, but excited to see what that has. And then third, I think similarly, North America, important market, the Kilian Jornet Foundation and or his States of Elevation. I think he's going to do something environmentally with this. And so I foresee it being sort of like checks every box for him. He can leverage, I shouldn't say that, but he can fulfill his competitive spirit. It's good for both of his brands, and hopefully there's net positive in some environmental aspect of it.
Yeah. It's, I think, a big signal that, there's so few races in Kilian's career that he hasn't won. To finish third, running 14:19.
I think it went away at him.
Unbelievable. And he knew he was gaining ground at the end too. Like Chris Myers was looking over his shoulder. So anyway, the GOAT coming back to redeem a quote unquote disappointing third place. And of course he wouldn't characterize it that way. He's much too classy. That's me just being an idiot, but it'll be great to have Kilian back on. I was actually looking at the start list, and like Caleb and Chris both haven't registered yet. I think Seth Ruling hasn't registered yet. There's a couple more in the men's top 10 who we're still hoping to commit here soon. They have the deadline is the lottery, which I think is December 6th this year. Are you going to the lottery? Are you doing Weight Watchers stuff?
Dude, I never miss it. It's
okay.
Absolutely. For me, that's the early Christmas. The lottery, Weight Watchers, and CIM, the trifecta. 10.
All right. Well, we get to hang out there. But I don't know. I had my eyes closed. I was tuning into the universe, and the number that came to me, 1851, Kilian, Western States, 2026.
It's one of those.
Part of the pod, and we'll see if the predictions are accurate or complete idiocy.
As much as I think we would love to believe we've been scratching at the ceiling of our sport, we're not even close. Yeah. It's there are multiple other Jims and Courtneys and Katies out there lurking in the shadows. So we just need to find the diamonds.
Yeah. Okay, I want to close by getting a little update on where you are with your running and your fitness and your goals, and would love to hear a bit about Trailfest too.
Oof.
Couple of final shout outs before we wind down. I just want to give a shout out. Ann Flower broke the 50-mile world record at Tunnel Hill last weekend. Catriona Jennings broke the 100-mile world record, ran 15:18 and 12:37 respectively for 50 miles and 100 miles. Both made a decent amount of money for breaking world records and winning. Good for them. I think both are unsponsored too. And Flower, maybe the biggest breakout star of 2020. So shout out to them. We don't really do a lot of coverage on these more road events worth mentioning here on the show. And then maybe the craziest, surreal, we live in a simulation piece of news I've ever seen is that Michelino Sunseri got pardoned by Donald Trump today.
Does that mean ultras are now, like, trail running's on Trump's radar?
It must be. I mean, it must be. It's sooner or later, like the Western States champion's going to be making a White House visit, like the Super Bowl champion does.
I mean, I'm just glad he pardoned him and he didn't just shut down the entire Teton National Park and just like bulldoze it. So it's probably the best of the alternative. I want to give a shout out, like, from Tunnel Hill, Courtney Olson. She lost her 50-mile world record to Ann, but then she broke Ann Trayson's 100K world record, another American record, sorry, but another unsponsored athlete. She's only the third ever female to break 7 hours. She ran 6 hours, 59 minutes, and 55 seconds. So, the women lit up Tunnel Hill.
What would be sweet is if Mountain Outpost did a live stream there next year, and
it'd be so easy.
Yeah, I mean, that's another indie race, right? Like, that is the race to run fast, right?
Think about like Tunnel Hill, JFK, Big Alta, Trailfest, The Rut. There's no shortage of great, Chuckanut. Dude, like I said, America has the culture. It has the community. Let's stop outsourcing. Let's stop exporting.
Maybe we could get Molly and Des to lead that charge next year. Like, each one picks a world record they want to go for at Tunnel Hill. Then they send the bat signal out to a bunch of their colleagues and competitors from the roads of like, hey, we're doing this here at Tunnel Hill in November. And then we get Mountain Outpost to live stream it. All of a sudden, ultra's on the map.
Let's go.
Even though we're already talking about, ultra runners getting presidential pardons, it kind of is on the map here. So all right, close us down here, Tim. I want to hear where your health, fitness, running, business career is at, if you can condense it into a couple of minutes.
So it'll be easy because there's zero fitness, there's zero aspiration, and for the first time in my 11-year pro career, I did not finish an ultra. Like, I DNF'd both my ultras. I don't have a ticket to the lottery. I was hanging out with Thornley last week, and he said, race director fitness is real, and it doesn't, like, it's zero fitness. And I was like, for the first time in my career, I'm feeling that. But I also feel incredibly fulfilled and couldn't be more stoked with the last 12 months of what I've been up to. So I'm on the right path, but I the competitor in me still is there, even if it's like, just a very small ember. I want to find a way back into Western States someday. That's the only thing on my radar that I feel like excites me. And so given, maybe full circle of all these conversations, being that I've spent a career chasing UTMB, promoting it, Lindsay reminded me, she's like, the only reason that race is so popular is because Dylan and you and all those jabronis keep talking about it and telling people to go do it. It's like, well, you're not wrong, but I've made the conscious decision of like, hey, the only race I can potentially get into states that isn't a by UTMB race is Black Canyon. So it's like, well, now I'm on that circuit. Like I have it chosen for me. I only have one option. I have to go there.
You're on the list? I don't think you're on the list.
No, I'm not. So Jamil, if you're listening, can you send me an ultra sign up code? Cause I still need to get it in, but yeah, that would be the one thing on my horizon right now.
Amazing. Buddy.
How about you? What are you doing? I saw the back-to-back 50K days.
Yeah. So are you going to TRE?
I will be there.
Okay, great. Let's hang out there too. So we'll basically be together the whole week.
Are we on the same flight?
I haven't booked my flights yet.
I'll send you my itinerary.
Into the lotto.
Yeah, fly back to SMF.
All right, great. Rye will be there too, so we can all hang. Amazing. Yeah, man. I have been trying to make progress with my fitness. I got a great pep talk from Adam Mary while we were at the World Championships. I was really making progress. Then I had a bit of a setback. My brother got married a couple of weeks ago, which was amazing, but also interrupted the momentum I had in my running. So I'm trying to reestablish some of that now, and it's going moderately well. We've got some fun stuff going on. I mean, Trail Runner of the Year is around the corner. So from a work perspective, that's kind of the major effort. So in the same way that I had a call to action earlier to get pro athletes to come to our races, and of course we'll make it our mission in life to blow you up. Also, we want all those pro athletes to vote in Trail Run of the Year. We really want the voice of the pro athletes to be reflected in the final results, and they are included in the weighted pool of voters who get a disproportionate amount of voting power in our algorithm. So Trail Run of the Year is the big work thing that we've got going on. We got huge announcements coming up about Gorge and stuff, which we'll talk about in a future pod. But life is good here in Marin. Family's good. Yeah, just charging forward to a strong end of the year.
You know what you said right there, not to hijack it and like keep it going, but the world champs, I'm really long and I'm buying WMRA and world champs. And I think the like reignition and like power behind what they're doing is exciting. And if I were buying and selling stocks, I'd be buying WMRA, the world champs. I'd be selling Golden Trail. I'd still be buying UTMB, but I'd be like, I'd have it like on my watch list of maybe dumping it at some point as other things come up. But I'm curious at some point, I want to hear about your experience out there, because it seems like what they've been doing the last couple of editions of the World Champs has really been leveling up, which I think is cool because it's something I think the sport like needs.
Yeah, it was incredibly rad, and I'll tell you all about it when we hang out. But anyway, dude, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I just want to like maybe put a final reinforcement on what you said earlier of like, nothing we said in the first half of the show we were talking about all these different races is meant to throw shade at anybody. It's meant to be like a transparent conversation with people who are stakeholders in the sport, who care about the sport, who make our living in the sport, about what's happening in an honest way. And, there's room for people to be critical. There's also room for people to acknowledge the positives that are going on in the sport. And, we try to do our best here at Freetrail to have sort of like a balanced perspective. And I felt like we were able to thread that needle here on the pod. And I appreciate you helping me do that, Tim.
And if you need an alternative, like maybe I'll start a podcast off the trails and I'm just going to go off on all the topics and hot takes and rants.
Well, yeah, there's space for that too. But, I think
because I think you've said it perfectly. As the sport grows, we want more and more people to come in, and we want to thoughtfully, kind of like shepherd it into the next generation of who takes the reins. And something that Buzz Burrell has said that I loved was that every generation has their like golden years. And so I think we're experiencing maybe our golden years, but the next generation is going to have theirs. So I just hope that the community always has a seat at the table. Because I think the moment we lose that, we lose our sport.
Yeah. Well said. Good place to end. Tim Tollefson, thanks for coming back on the show, buddy.
Thanks, bud.